Hi everyone, I am recording a screencast video lecture for Module 5. So I'm going to go over the assignments for this week and then let you know about the reading, and I've also uploaded some things to the handouts and resources section on the modules page. And then this week we are doing our second and last peer review assignment with the technical report, early draft. So it's going to work exactly the same as the instruction manual early draft at the end of this module week. So this next week's Thursday, I don't know how the best way to say that. When Module 5 ends, once you submit that, the day after, you should be automatically assigned, just like with the instruction manual early draft, one of your classmates' technical report early drafts to provide peer feedback on. So I encourage to watch or rewatch the video I did on peer review. People did well on the peer review for the instruction manual, but there were some cases where people weren't filling out each area of the rubric element and providing a kind of thoughtful endnote that is constructive for their classmates. And in that video that I recorded on peer feedback, that was back when we were doing the instruction manual, I take you through what that looks like, where you go about filling out each element of the rubric as you're doing peer review. So if you have any questions on that, just let me know. But this is our last peer review for the class and our second major assignment, and then we'll have one other major assignment that's a group assignment after this. So the instruction manual, the tech report, and then the grant proposal project are the three major projects for the class. Okay, so for this week, you are being asked to read Chapter 8, which is on technical reports, obviously. And then there's this article on scientific reviews and recommendations, and it's not specific to technical reports, but it does provide some good information on how you should evaluate sources and how you should go about kind of planning how you're writing a quote-unquote science-based document, but technical report writing falls under that. So it's worth kind of a quick read through, just kind of perusing it for points that will be helpful for you to complete the technical report early draft and the final submission of the early draft. So as I've done for other textbook readings in the handouts and resources module, I've uploaded the PowerPoint for Chapter 8, and as a reminder from something I put in one of my announcements, I think the very first one maybe, but I used the 4th edition of this text because the publishers are no longer publishing the 3rd edition, so they only offered to give me the 4th edition. So the content and what I said in that first announcement was that you can use the 3rd or the 4th edition, and the content is pretty much the same. It's just reorganized a little bit differently. So, and I say that because I did. And I'll show this to you in just a second. I just snapped some pictures kind of crudely from Chapter 8, and my page numbers I think are going to be different from the 4th edition page numbers are different from the 3rd edition page numbers. But the content is what we're more interested in than page numbers. So I've got that PowerPoint for Chapter 8, so you want to look through the writing the technical reports. And the chapter is really crucial to this module week because you are asked to use the informal report model or template that is provided in that Chapter 8 in the textbook. So before I go into the technical report early draft, you are asked to do this reflection, which is on evaluating sources, because this is the first assignment where you are asked to do research and integrate that research into your writing, in this case, the technical report. So what this assignment is asking you to do is read this, something like a reading ethics, and it's going to ask you to engage with that reading with two of your sources. So for the technical report early draft, you're asked to integrate 3 sources. And so for this assignment, the reflection on evaluating sources and research, you're asked to take 2 of those 3 sources and then really kind of do a deep dive in evaluating them. Well, I say use 2 of the 3 sources you plan on using in your tech report, but the instructions here are saying it's not required. I think it's much better and it makes much more logical sense to use 2 of the sources you plan on using in your technical report early draft. So it gives you a better understanding of those sources. And something like a reading ethic, so what you have to do is it's asking you to complete the 6 recommended steps for engaging and evaluating sources and research. And you do this twice, right? So you do source 1 and then do the 6 recommended steps, and then you do source 2 and then you do the 6 recommended steps. And the steps are located a little bit down here, right? So it starts off with first, second, third. 1. It starts with exigence. Sorry, my mistake. So it starts with exigence and then goes through response, terms and concepts, citations, questions, and then speculative response. So the steps themselves, they look wordy because they are a little bit wordy, but once you read them, it should become it's what I would consider relatively straightforward reading. It's not something you should read and have a real struggle understanding. But if you are struggling with that, don't hesitate to reach out. So you just want to, I would set up this however you want. I don't believe it's required to do it in a memo format. It's not, but you can if you want, if that's easier for you, and then it keeps you with that consistency. And then I would just break it into source 1, and then identify what the source is, and then have you can say step 1, or you can just use numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'll know what you're referring to, so you don't have to write like step 1 exigence, and step 2, so on and so forth. So however that works best for you. So that is the reflection assignment, and it's not a discussion assignment, so you don't have to respond to any classmates for that assignment. And because you are doing sources in that reflection and also the technical report early draft, I did upload in the handouts and resources this document that I put together but has gone through lots of iterations over many years. I'm just going to download it. But it's essentially and hopefully this will sound familiar to everybody, but it basically kind of talks to you about, where do I do research? What is a good source look like? And like I said, this should sound familiar if you've done the basic training at the Hunt Library, kind of that module where you get the certificate, and then there's the evaluating sources. That's also similar, where you get a certificate, but this one is, it talks about, what I talk about is, how do you distinguish, what's a scholarly peer-reviewed article versus other periodicals, and they're called periodicals because they're published periodically, and determining the credibility of a source, and that's what we kind of got those in highlighted. It's what we call information literacy, is your ability to your literacy skill in how to evaluate and understand information, wherever the information is coming from and whatever the information is. That's what evaluating sources is. So what I basically go through is I break down these four kind of main areas of information, which is scholarly, substantive, popular, and sensational. And for any sources that you do, at least for this class, and probably for most of your courses, is the first two. So scholarly and substantive are the best types of sources. You want to always stay away from popular and sensational. And I kind of go through what each means, and then I break it down even further. What do they look like? Right. So scholarly is, scholars are publishing articles, and they go through a long review process, which means they're usually the most credible. They're usually also longer, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, but they are disciplinary specific. So they can, if you're not within that discipline, you might have a much harder time understanding it. Like if I was reading something on avionics, I would be like, I don't really understand what's happening in this article. I could probably glean information from it, but I don't have the disciplinary training in that to be able to understand it to the best of my ability. And then I give examples of all the four categories, and then I talk about the substantive. And substantive is, what those credible sources that we find on the web are gonna fall under the substantive. So, and that also includes substantive articles from newspapers, substantive articles from magazines, and not all magazines and newspapers are substantive sources. Same with anything from the web. So it then puts the onus on you to make sure that when you're looking for web sources, that those sources are in fact substantive and credible. And I try to explain, because not everybody understands why they're called substantive, but they're called substantive because their content, and if they have evidence, it has substance, or it's substantial, it's grounded in something that is quote unquote real. So, and I give some examples here of what would be substantive news or general interest periodicals, but there's a whole, the web, right, has a whole slew of substantive things that we look at, especially things that are published by companies or organizations. As long as it's not propaganda, it's usually considered substantive. So that's where you have to use that information literacy skill set to identify, like, okay, the company's publishing this, are they publishing it objectively, or is it biased for these reasons, and so on and so forth. The popular and the sensationalist things, right, are things like Reader's Digest, Sports Illustrated, and fashion magazines, and then sensationalist periodicals, right, are those things that sometimes might catch our eyes at the grocery store. So like the National Examiner and the Star and the Globe. The other thing I provide in this document that might be helpful is the databases that you can use in the Hunt library to find articles. And so I give you some, if you've never done it, or you've done it before but maybe you've forgotten, or you just need like a reminder, these are databases that are good to start out at. And then of course you can look through other databases as well. And again, I'm hoping this sounds familiar to everyone, but I'm just going to go ahead and go into the Hunt library really quickly, and I should already be logged in. But when you go into the Hunt library, you get to those databases by clicking on Research Databases, and then that will take you to all the databases that the Hunt library subscribes to, and they're alphabetized. So like Academic OneFile is one that I recommend. JSTOR is a really good one. It's one of the most common and one of the largest. Oops, I guess I'm not logged in. I know I've done the duo authentication. So, okay, there we go. So this is just very quickly, if you use JSTOR, and I recommend you at least play around with it if you've never played around with it. and I always show JSTOR just because it's slightly different from the majority of databases, but JSTOR is one of the best databases to use for researching, is you want to click Advanced Search. And what this does, normally what happens if you go to other databases is you'll automatically get this screen that's got multiple field boxes and different things that you can check for when you're doing research. But for JSTOR, you have to choose Advanced Search because it then gives you those options. And then the thing about JSTOR is that everything in there is, so the database is JSTOR and it houses tons of journals. So these journals are published either once, twice, 3 times, or 4 times a year. And then within each of these journals, there might be like 4 or 5 articles, and then there might be like 10 book reviews where people review an academic book that's come out and they're providing their opinion on it. This is what they talk about. This is their thesis, etc., etc. Here's where I think it's good. Here's where it could use improvement. So everything in here is from scholarly articles, but the thing that you want to make sure you do is you click articles, because what happens is they do have books in here, so they'll have some ebooks, but you don't want to use ebooks because you don't have time to read through the ebooks, or I'm guessing you don't have the time to read through books at this point. And you don't want, if you don't click articles, you're going to get those book reviews. So something that students have done a lot in the past is if they don't click on articles and then they start popping keywords into the field boxes, the field search boxes, they'll get these book reviews that pop up, and they're in here because they are part of the journals when the journals are published. So, but the book reviews do not count as sources. So what would count as a source is if you actually read the book that the book review is about and then use that book as a source. But again, I'm guessing people's time is limited, so I would please feel free to stay away from books. I recommend it. Unless there's a book that's totally essential to what you want to talk about. So that's JSTOR, and that's the one I definitely recommend if you're not used to, or if you've never been in there. I always recommend people to go there first. And the one, where was I? Where is that document? Here it is. I also talk about kind of finding sources and keywords. Keywords is really necessary to finding the right sources, and using keywords is really the trick to finding the best sources for you. And if you don't, and one of the things that a lot of people or a lot of students sometimes don't know, not necessarily always, a lot of people sometimes are researching something that they have a lot of familiarity with, so they already know the keywords that are going to work. But if you don't, or if you're not really sure, what you have to do is you have to move to what's called informal research. And informal research is where you are unfamiliar with a topic, and then that's where you want to start by just Googling things or going to Wikipedia. And even though we don't use those sources in our writing when we're in an academic class, they do provide you with kind of a basic understanding of the topic and can alert you to significant keywords, like if you see the same words coming up all the time. Maybe it points you to an area of contention that you didn't know existed. So informal research is a great way to kind of dive into a topic, and I still do it to this day, and that's because I have to keep up with my research. So even though I have studied this one thing for like 15 years, I'm continually having to do informal research to make sure, okay, has anything else been said about this? What are people currently arguing now versus 10 years ago or 15 years ago? And so you have to keep up with the keywords, and you have to constantly kind of stay alert to the trends that that occur within the particular topic and or the discipline. So that's where informal research is always helpful, and then you take that information and those keywords, and then you do that formal research, which is then where you're looking for those scholarly and substantive sources, whether those are keywords that you're plugging into Google to find a substantive web source, or plugging those into databases through the Hunt library. So that's the connection between informal and formal research. So that is available for you guys on, if I can just figure out where your here it is, in the handouts and resources modules. Okay, so I've talked about the reflection assignment, and then the evaluating sources and research, and yes, the reflection assignment, which is evaluating sources. Sorry. So then you have the discussion memo, which is really where you start to talk about, this is the thing I want to talk about in my tech report. So this is a discussion assignment, so you'll be doing response posts, and you'll be doing 3 response posts. So like all discussion memo assignments, you want to post, try to post no later than the 3rd day of the module, just to give your classmates the chance to read and respond meaningfully to whatever you're posting. And I will also be responding to these, because sometimes I feel it's counterproductive, because my responses will be like, good tool or technology. What I kind of want to do is be like, this will make sense when I talk about the tech report early draft, but I really kind of want it to be an affirmation for you that what you're writing about, what you're posting about, like the tool or tech, or and your hypothetical organization and your hypothetical organization's field and or goals. So what I kind of want to do is I want to say, okay, this will work to talk about. And the other thing I'm probably going to be addressing is, and you don't have to answer me in the discussion, although you can, or you can message me privately, is what is the purpose of it? So what type of technical report is that? And I'm going to talk about that when I go into the tech report early draft assignment. And that's because that's where a lot of students fall short, or I've noticed they've fallen short when doing this assignment in the past. And that's a really important part of the technical report, because that's the part that will hold your thesis and the argument. So that's the discussion assignment. And then so let's get into that tech report early draft assignment. So I'm just going to quickly go over the criteria, because just like for the instruction manual, you've got the early draft criteria versus the final submission criteria. So for your early draft criteria, it should be at least 500 words. It can be more than that, but you want it to at least be 500 words. And you want to use that, I never know how to say their names, Chabot and Dragas, the editors of our textbook. Like I said before, you want to use that informal report format, and then integrate 3 appropriate and properly cited sources. And the properly cited means you have the in-text citations properly cited, and you have the references page. So you have to not only make sure that the sources are appropriate, which means credible, which is what I talked about in how do you identify the credible sources through evaluation. So they not only have to be credible, but then you have to cite them as best you can in APA. So, and then for the final technical report, you're just building on that. So instead of 500 words, it needs to be at least 1,000 words. You have to make sure you're implementing APA formatting. You're doubling your sources, so you're moving from 3 sources to 6 sources. You have to provide a clear and strong recommendation for or against the use of the tool or technology, right? That's your thesis statement. And then you unlike the instruction manual assignment, this one, and this is the last bullet point, for this assignment you have to have a formatted abstract, and that concisely summarizes your technical report, and 125 words is kind of a normal length for an abstract. So that's the final submission requirements, and then this goes into the peer review, which is very similar to the instruction manual. So to help out with this, I have uploaded, so the chapter 8 selected images, these are those kind of crude pictures I said I took because I don't have a scanner at my house. I don't have a printer or a scanner. So I just used my phone and turned them into PDFs and then merged them. So this is just from the 4th edition, and it's a weird scrolling thing. So this is just the beginning of chapter 8. I'm not going to look at anything on there. The thing I'm interested on is the kinds of report, and that's what I was talking about, where your thesis is kind of important to, is the kind of report. And one of the things I've given a lot of feedback on in early drafts of the technical report is, well, what kind of report is your report? So you have to have a clear understanding of what is that. And so here are, and the book says, right, we can generally identify the following types of technical reports, right? So when this talks about, is it a recommendation report? Is it an evaluation report? Is it a feasibility report? Is it a progress report or a status report? Is it a trip report, a personnel report, an economic justification report? So you really have to know, so it's not only about identifying the tool or technology, but you have to understand, and what's the type of report I'm writing. Now, the two I think that would make the most sense and would probably be the easiest for this assignment is the recommendation report or the feasibility report. And that's because, or possibly the economic justification report. And I say that because if I go back to the criteria for the technical report, the thesis for this assignment is a strong recommendation for or against the use of the tool or technology. So whatever tool or tech you're choosing, the technical report thesis should ultimately be, are you recommending it or are you not recommending it, and why or why not? So you can't just say I'm recommending it or I'm not recommending it. You then have to answer because these reasons, and they might be feasibility reasons. That's why I'm saying the recommendation report makes the most sense. If you're not recommending something and it's due to something like feasibility, you might be doing a feasibility report. Or an economic justification report, right? This explains the cost of a project or action and then argues for the cost effectiveness of the project. So it could also be that. So depending on what you're doing, those three make the most sense to me in terms of what kind of report you're doing. So that's what I would encourage. I think it's the easiest thing to do based on the thesis and the argumentative objectives for the technical report. And then I've got this here. This is the informal. I've only, and I don't think I gave you all of them. All the pictures from the text, because I'm presuming that you all have the text. But this is the part of the textbook that you want to focus on, is this informal report headings. So it's got this up here, right? So it's a longer memo heading than what we normally do, right? So it has date to, from, subject, reference, action required, distribution list, and then it kind of talks about what each one, the objective of each one of these are, and then the parts. So these are the different sections, right? So you have the introduction, and then did I not go? What page? 160, and this is 161. Yeah, sorry, that's a little blurry. But subject or report topic, report purpose, background or rationale, summary, discussion, conclusion, right there. And then there's maybe like 2 other pages or 3 other pages that go over the informal report, and then there's an example of an informal report in the textbook. And so I would look at these pictures if they're helpful, but definitely also look at your textbook to look at that example of the informal report, because what can get confusing about chapter 8 is there's this like few pages on the informal report, and then there's this long section on formal reports, and that you don't have to worry about because we're focusing on the informal report formatting for the technical report. So that's the part, and it's in the first part of the chapter. And that's why I wanted to show the pictures, because the chapter is longer and it's got all of these examples and images of different types of reports. I just kind of wanted to be like, you only have to worry about the informal report. Don't worry about the rest. So the last thing, because I know this is getting a little bit lengthy, this screencast video lecture, I apologize. The last thing, and I just want to let you know what I have is I did upload to Tech Report student samples. So I encourage you to look at those. These were A's, so they did receive good grades, and those are there for you as examples. So you'll see that they've got their APA cover pages. I'm gonna clean this computer. They've got their cover pages, their abstract page, and they have the report. You can see how they've integrated research throughout the report, and then they end with their references page. And again, unlike the instruction manual, there's no rhetorical reflection memo. There's no reflection memo at the end of the technical report. So you don't have to worry about that, because now we're adding abstract and sources, so then we have a references page. Okay, so that's everything. I just kind of wanted to go through what I've uploaded here, what's available to you, and what you're doing this week. And because it's another peer review, it's going to fall into our technical report kind of working on it is going to fall into next module week as well. So if you have any questions, let me know. You can feel free to message me on Canvas or email me. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye-bye.